being in Western Europe is interesting because you see that there are other societies that live pretty well that have slightly different ways of doing things. And, for example, we talked about France not being a perfect society, but it being a society that thinks about race slightly differently and thinks about a multi-ethnic society differently. And when I first moved here and found myself being asked, what was my background, and basically over and over again having to reiterate the plantation logic of the one drop rule outside of the American context where people swam in that water, it started to sound more and more absurd to me. Explaining why a drop of black blood makes a person black to people that didn't grow up in a slave society, people who had colonies but never had slavery within their national borders and therefore didn't know anything about the laws of hypodescent or understand why black meant unfree and therefore you can't inherit even if you have blue eyes and all of this stuff. Constantly having to reaffirm the American, explain the rules of the all-American skin game, as Stanley Crouch termed it. I mean, it just made that fall apart for me. And so many things work that way. I became aware in a way I never was before I left, just how violent America can be, how serious it is to have a society that has more guns than people in it, what that means, why a shooting like this mass shooting that just happened in Sacramento barely registers in the American media, but that would be the biggest story in any number of Western European nations for the entire 2022 if that many people got shot on the street one night. It's just something that barely registers in America. And that becomes shocking to you once you realize that the water is different elsewhere or that you're not even in water. At the same time, to reiterate one point that I think is really true, is that America is not all bad. And living in other societies, even wealthy ones that have a lot going for them, you really can realize that, I go back to America constantly. And it's not just in elite spaces. Certainly in elite spaces, America really does a better job at integrating people from all different walks of life. But also in non-elite spaces, you can be in Austin, Texas, or in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Portland, Oregon, even, and you can encounter people on the street, in a restaurant, in real spaces, encountering each other, Latinos, Blacks, Asians, whites, actually living with each other in ways that you don't see everywhere. And it works pretty well, and people have respect for each other, and people really have come a long way. America has assimilated lots of people, and I think we talk about all the ways that it doesn't work all the time, but I don't think that we're nearly proud enough of how nothing like this has ever happened before. A society like a melting pot like this, it really does function a hell of a lot at the time.